Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Growthwell podcast, where we explore the art of balancing professional growth and personal well-being. I'm your host, Josh Byrd. I've got an awesome guest for you, an old friend, one of the first people that kind of took me in the healthcare technology marketing scene. I've always been thankful for his friendship. He is the founder of healthcareittoday.com and the Swaay.Health communities. He runs an amazing community and conference for healthcare marketers to connect and join. But on top of that, he is a father of 5 kids, and they range from 12 to 20. And so needless to say, he is a busy dude. Not to mention, last time I talked, he goes from anywhere from 30 to 50 conferences a year. Busy guy. Needless to say, let's get right to it. Here's my friend, John Lynn. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Josh. I'm excited to be here. I love the podcast. I love the approach you're taking. I've been creating content for a long time, but you definitely have a certain style that I love and enjoy, and I always learn from you when I spend time together. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. That means a lot. This has been a lot of fun. I think I've told bits and pieces of the story on air before, but I got talked into doing this podcast, and I've fallen in love with it. I've fallen in love with sharing these stories. So tell our audience a little bit about you, work and personal life that you're willing to share, and kind of how you think about that balance between the two.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm a tech guy by background, which, I'm literally tech guy on Twitter, as you know. And so I came from the tech industry, but it wasn't as satisfying for me, I think, as it was fine. It was a job, and I did it well, and I achieved some goals, especially when I moved into healthcare. I was making a difference for the people that were using it, but I always have this passion for learning and for growth, and I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. At the end of the day, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. You'll love this funny story. I was working Wendy's, 17-year-old in high school. I was talking to this lady I was doing the grill. She's making the sandwiches, and we're sitting there talking. I said, well, I'm going to be a millionaire by, I don't know what age I said, 30 or something ridiculous, right? Yeah. And she looked at me and she's like, John, of all the people here, you're the only one that I think that could happen. I was like,
what a compliment, though.
Crazy, right? But it shows you my mindset, right? My mindset was, I want to be an entrepreneur. I have this drive to be successful. Yeah. And so for me, it was interesting. I was working a job. I called it a nothing job. It was easy. I was working at a slow pace, doing way more than everyone else. It was in a mix of higher ed and healthcare. And so I was doing good work. I was accomplishing a lot, but it was easy. I had multiple children. I would take off for 12 weeks because that was what FMLA allowed, and it was no problem. It didn't, things kept on going. Everything was fine. But then I started a blog about EMR, and it grew, and it did pretty well. And then they gave $36 billion of stimulus money for EMR, and this ride that we were on there. And let's just say the stimulus package worked for my blogs, and quit the day job about 15 years ago to be a full-time blogger, entrepreneur. There's a lot more to the story, but I'll save that for another day. But it was interesting. The blogs were nights and weekends. They were date money, and then eventually they started augmenting the income. And then eventually they became the income. And then eventually now, we have 20 people at Healthcare Scene, which is the overarching company, doing Healthcare IT Today and Swaay.Health. So, it's really grown over time.
Yeah. How long did it take to go from that nights and weekends, date money, to I'm quitting everything else and this is my full-time gig? Because I think there's a real misnomer for a lot of people about how long that can or should take.
Yeah. It's an overnight success, but they don't see the 4.5 years that I was grinding. The first 6 months of that 4.5 years, I posted 1,000 times on a forum called EMR Update, trying to drive traffic, but also learning. I was actually bored doing my master's as well. So during class, I would just be reading about electronic medical record and trying to drive traffic to it. So anyway, I made it to the first page of Google for EMR, but that was all the traffic I could generate, 1,000 page views a day. And so I was making money. I got a check every month, and, and they grew a little bit over time. But then when they gave the stimulus, all of that work over 4.5 years. By that point, it was like 2 sites, and then it just blew up. And so
right.
It was 4.5 years of hard work. And then, I was lucky, if you will, right? They say luck comes to those that work hard. And,
yeah,
I
that's right.
For 4.5 years, and then finally the luck paid off.
The harder you work, the luckier you get. That's what they say. And I would agree with that. And I think the key is just to make sure you're not burning yourself out, so that when your moment comes, you can actually capture it. It's like that Eminem song, what are you going to do when your moment comes? And I think you did that masterfully, and it's been fun to watch as a friend of yours. And so, why do you do it? What gets you up in the morning? What keeps you going? Is it that entrepreneurial spirit? Is it a fascination with healthcare? Some combination of it, or something totally different? What gets you out of bed every morning to do the work and grow the businesses that you oversee?
I've never shared this publicly, and I wasn't thinking I was going to share, but I like you, Josh. So awesome. I'm going to go a little personal. I was raised with a family of 7 kids, and my dad had a gallbladder attack, had depression, ran into a lot of challenges, right? And imagine that with 7 kids. And so we grew up, we always had what we needed, but we didn't have a lot, right? And so, right. And my dad made some financial choices that were, not so great over the years. There were some challenges, right?
Sure.
And I lived that, and I felt that. And so I think, but what's interesting is within all of that, he always wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted it in the maddest way. And I understand it completely, because I have that too, right? I wanted to be it. I love the building and the creation. It's just so much fun. Yeah. But he made really bad choices, and our family struggled because of some of those things, right? And so, I think, when you say, what is my why, in some ways I need to go to therapy for financial stuff, because I don't want to be my dad, right? I want to provide for my family in a financial way. And so that, in some ways, to be fair, is a lot of my drive of why I work so hard, and why it matters to me is because I want to provide for my family in the way I can that my dad didn't. So I guess that's one side of it. That's kind of a more personal one that, I said, I probably should check some therapy on it and improve my life.
I'm a therapy believer. It's not as a lot of people have stigmatized it, but it's good. It's healthy. So, if you think you need it, go for it. I love my therapist, so.
No, I'm with you. I love my therapist too, right? We just haven't gone the financial route. There's plenty of other things to work on. But, going beyond that, kind of like that personal drive, what is my personal drive to be an entrepreneur? I think that's part of it. But I think the other thing for me, and I think you see it in the work that we do, which is I just want to be useful.
Yes.
I love being useful to someone else. It's as much as I enjoy selling that big ad package on Healthcare IT Today, or a sponsorship on Swaay, which is great and it feels like a success and it helps drive the business forward, I enjoy someone else coming up to me and saying, hey, John, when you asked me the question, hey, what do you like better? Do you like PR or do you like writing? Mm-hmm. You changed my life with that simple question, right? And I wasn't even doing much. I was just curious, and I was trying to understand what they wanted. And they're like, yeah, I realized I hated the writing. I love the PR. I need to go all in on that. And so, to me, being useful to someone, providing, whether it's content on Healthcare IT Today or a blog or the conference, when I hear someone say, man, this helped me so much, or what you said helped me, that's like gold. And, if I could bottle that up and sell it, I'd be able to retire, but you can't.
That's right. And you have to get up and do it day in and day out, and not really know when you start the day where the impact you're going to make is. I'll tell for our listeners, at the most recent Swaay.Health conference that you put on, you gave me some pretty major encouragement on this podcast that I was doing something that mattered. And I hold that very tightly. And And, you guys were even generous enough to give me an award for it. And it sits right over there. And I look at it all the time as a reminder of a conversation that you and I had outside of, I think it was breakfast that morning, right? Where we were talking about why I started this. And I appreciate that. And I love that you go out and you're looking for that impact, right? Because that is one of the things that makes this world better, right? And I think that as long as we're getting up in the morning and trying to make the world a little better than it was yesterday, if we all did that just a little bit, I think it would be really powerful, right?
Yeah. I actually stole this from Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress, which is what powers 20% of the internet and all the blogging and everything that happened there. But I was talking to him one time, and he told a story about when someone came and asked him like some simple question about WordPress. And he's like, I answered the question. And people are like, why are you, the founder of WordPress, super successful, answering a question about like, how do you change a password or something ridiculous like that? Right? And he's like, John, he said, what's interesting is I know the answer and I know I can help them. He said, and when I help them, they show gratitude back and I feel good about being able to serve them. At the core of all of this is service, right? Yes. He's like, and when I serve them, he said, I get a feeling that I can't find any other way. The only way to feel that way is to serve other people and to impact and change their life. And he said, that's the only way you can do it. You can't buy that. You can have all the money in the world, but you can't buy the feeling of, I helped that person and made a difference in their life. And anyway, when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's powerful, right? And that's the job I like most.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing. I remember at Patient Co., which was the first business of mine or that I was a part of that really took off. And early on, we put up a poster that we bought at a place called Startup Vitamins. I'm not even sure if it exists, but it said, if our customer has a problem, I am part of the solution. And it meant, we as a team, marketing walked by that, dev walked by that, customer service walked by that. And we had this attitude of just like, add value. Find a way to add value in everything you do. And that's something that you really exude. So I'm curious, to keep yourself kind of going day in and day out, do you have rituals and habits and routines, things that you have to have or like to have to really make sure that your work is maximized?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, like, I'm definitely a ritual guy, like I have my routines that I like, and for me, some of them are spiritual, waking up with prayer, doing daily scripture study is something that's powerful for me. And, it's interesting, whether you believe in the spiritual side or not, one of the beautiful things of prayer is it's a time to show gratitude, at least in our first structure, show gratitude and then ask God what you need, for. And it's like, I think people underestimate the power, whether you believe in the spiritual side or not, of waking up and saying, what am I grateful for that day? And so it like reframes your mindset in a really beautiful way. That's like, man, I have a lot to be grateful for. And let me acknowledge what I am grateful for. So I'd say prayer is like a nice way in that acknowledgement of gratitude. And then also looking forward to say, okay, what else do I need to work on? What's going to be a challenge today? So I think those two, things kind of ground me as part of my ritual. And then the other one for me, I like to lay in bed with my tablet and scroll through the emails and see what the day's going to bring. Sometimes it sets me up in a good way, sometimes not. But it's kind of this fresh, relaxing start to see what came in. I'm a zero inbox guy, which I know a lot of people are like, what's that? They don't know what that means, which technically is usually about 20 emails. If I'm at 40, I'm feeling behind. And if I'm at 10, I'm like, I must be about to go on vacation. But, and so there's always a few in there that are projects, but if they're in there, it's something I want to work on. So anyway, I like to like kind of see what the opportunities are that came in that day. So I think that's maybe another ritual. And then for me, I'd say I do my best to not schedule meetings. My team, Colin, Brittany, and the rest of the team, they know I'm an anti-meeting guy. Like, sure, sometimes that you need a meeting for a creative purpose or to bang through 15 things that are all, correlated. That makes sense to have a meeting. If I'm selling something, I need a meeting to build relationships. That's fine. But I try to not do meetings. I actually learned this from my cousin. He's second cousin that was in charge of the business school at BYU Hawaii, and I just moved out there, and he's like, John, we decided not to have any meetings. He's like, what does that mean for me? He's like, it means I send a lot more emails. And he said, and to be fair, twice a year we'll do like a big meeting with everyone just to bring everyone together. But he's like, turns out no one complained. Everyone was happy to do it.
I was taking lunch break before we just jumped on to here, and I was feeling tired, and I was like, why am I feeling so tired today? I had 4 meetings back to back to back, and all of them were somebody that I work with that has a legitimate need from me, but it was just sort of back to back to back of pouring out and not refilling yet. And so I had to literally take the hour between that last one and you to reset, right? Because I was drained, and I was like, I'm not going to give John or our listeners my best unless I take this hour and totally reset. And I did. And I think I've got some energy now. So, thanks to a little bit in part to our non-sponsor of coffee, but sometimes you have to do that. So have you always been that disciplined? You talked about being 17 and being at Wendy's. Was your discipline showing then, or did something happen where you sort of had a, quote, come to Jesus moment and you're like, whoa, I've got to get more disciplined or this is not going to go so well?
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about because for the longest time, I always felt kind of like a perfectionist.
Okay.
But whenever someone would say that, I'm like, that doesn't really fit me though. Because there's a lot of things I don't care about, right? Like, right. So like, I would be like, well, but I'm not a perfectionist of everything. And so then I never wanted to own that I was a perfectionist because it didn't quite fit. And so over time, I thought about it a lot, and I finally realized what I am. And what I like is I like perfect optimization. So like, yes. I like to perfectly optimize whatever I'm doing, whether it's this podcast with you or whether it's a meeting to plan the next Swaay.Health or whatever it is. Like, I want it to be perfectly optimized. So I don't want 4 people there if only 3 people are needed, right? Like, yes. So, that was my mindset as a kid as well. In fact, my mom would come up to me and she's like, John, you can't do everything. And I remember her hearing that.
Why not?
Well, okay, she's right. You can't, right? I mean, fundamentally, I understood you couldn't. And I remember looking at her, it's like, well, you're right, Mom, but I'm sure going to try.
Heck yeah. I love that answer. That's why I said, why not? I was like, tell me I can't, and I'm going to show you I can, right?
Yeah, and when you look at it, it was me doing that perfect optimization, which was, you're right, Mom, I can't do everything, but I'm going to optimize my time in a way that I can do as much as possible. So, I mean, just to give you a feel, I would wake up early morning in high school for an early morning seminary class. Then I'd go to school. Then I'd go at noon to Wendy's. And then at 5 o'clock, I would go to my church activity. And then I'd be home. I didn't do homework. It was easy. Class was easy. Yeah. But anyway, I didn't need to. It was so easy. But anyway, so it was like, I optimized my day, and Monday, Wednesday was days that I was doing church and family stuff in the evening, and then Friday I was optimized to go out with friends. Saturday I was going out with friends after a 12-hour workday. So like I'd already optimized, which some say maybe I work too much or do too much, but it was like that was my mindset as a kid, and still holds true today, fortunately and unfortunately.
So I'm sure we could go into a whole podcast about how you optimize your life, but I have to ask, in brief, what do you do if you're an optimizer? Because I think I am, and so many of our listeners are. What do you do to optimize your life? How do you do that?
It's interesting that I'll go back to the email. It actually helps me to say no.
Yes.
Let me explain. Like, so if my email's at 10 and you send me a certain request, then I'm going to reply to you differently than if my email's at 50 and I'm behind and I know there's a lot to do. Because if I see my email at 50, then I'm going to realize, hey, I got a lot of things that I need to work on. And so if you send me a request when I have 50, I'm more likely to say no to things. So, it's a little like mind trick that I guess I've created for myself to allow myself to the ability and the strength, I guess it is, to be able to say no and not feel guilty about it, right? Because I want to help as many people as possible, but I can't. And so this is like one lever for me of looking at the email. It says, man, I'm so far behind. Now when you send me that thing that I'd like to do but isn't really important to the business or isn't important to whatever, then it makes it easier for me to say, sorry, I can't do that. So anyway, that's a little trick I've done.
So I should be very grateful then that you said yes to being on this podcast, right? Because you could have said no, and that's your default. But I do appreciate it. So you can't.
I would actually say my default is yes. My default is to say yes to people, and so that I need some sort of mechanism to convince myself to say no. But I was excited to be on here, so that was an easy yes.
Awesome. But you can't be perfectly optimized all the time. So what do you have set up around you, people, systems, things, processes that help you recognize when you're off balance? Because I find with myself and most of the people I talk to, other things start getting out of whack. Maybe it's like your inbox, right? When you've got 50 emails, but you have that sort of referee throwing a flag on the play and saying, hey, John, things are a little off balance. So what do you rely on most? And then when you realize that, what do you do? What's your main go-to to bring yourself back to center?
It's really interesting because I mentioned to you before we started that I just got married in September. So
congratulations, officially on the air. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you, man. And it's been awesome, right? She's amazing. I feel lucky and really blessed to have her in my life. But I'll say that it's been this new learning experience for her understanding how I work and what does it mean for me as an entrepreneur to work, and when do I need to work and when do I not? Because as an entrepreneur, you can choose to work unlimited.
Yes.
But the work is never, ever done. But what also is true is I can also say no to everything, right? And so finding that balance between I could work unlimited and never stop and still there would be more to do, and I could say no to everything because I am the boss. I could just say, sorry, this isn't going to do. And so I'm not sure we have a good answer, but I'd say my answer that we're working on with my new wife and I is having that communication and allowing her, especially, I think she's the most important person, but also my kids to a large extent as well, to be able to come and say, hey, John, you need to do this. And to make sure that when she says that, I accept it in a way that doesn't shame her from doing it again in the future.
Right.
Because I could certainly say, are you trying to ruin my business? What are you doing? Right. And if I do that, she won't say that again. And so giving her that space, which to be fair, I'm not perfect either. I think you started the podcast that we're not perfect. We can't perfectly optimize. I'm sure going to try though, right?
Yeah, that's all you can do is try a little more.
Yeah, and so giving her that space to be able to say, hey, I need you, or this needs you, I think that's one way. The second one that I think is interesting for me is I set a time when I quit the day job, I was like, okay, what does my schedule look like? And I was like, well, I've been working 8 to 5. So should I just do 8 to 5, right? And so I kind of set that up, 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. That's what I would try to do. And so I try at 5 o'clock to disconnect, go have dinner, hang out with the kids, watch a movie, whatever else. Maybe sometimes I have to get on later again. So I try to do 8 to 5. And then on weekends, I try not to work either. And so that helps me to reset as well. There's lots of studies out there that show that having those breaks actually makes you more efficient. And so for me, that's what it is. Having Saturday, and then I don't work Sunday unless there's like a conference that I have to go to or something. I just try, Saturday I may, cheat occasionally if there's something really, doing, but usually it's a couple hours, not the entire day. And then Sunday I just don't work on Sundays as part of kind of my religious belief. And so that is a time to let my brain catch up with everything that's happened during the week and kind of reset and say, where am I at?
Yeah, I think that's so wise to have those walls and be clear with the others in your business and in your family where those walls are, what your priorities. And we do the same in my family. I don't work hardly ever on a weekend. I try to be done by a certain time at night so I can not only dive into my family, but be mentally present for my family as well. And so I think that's so important. So here's your chance to help somebody and help all of our listeners, as we already know you love to do. What advice would you give others who perhaps are either struggling with balancing their career and their personal life, or they want to build an entrepreneurial side hustle and turn it into, the John Lynn empire equivalent, right? But really, I find that our listeners are so entrepreneurial minded. And so what can we give them that helps them do that?
So I think what's interesting is that when I started doing this, my side hustle was my hobby. Like, this is what I did for fun. Like, it was fun for me to build, a website, to figure out search engine optimization, to understand ad optimization and how Google AdSense worked. Like, this was my hobby. This is what I would do on a Christmas break. And so it's fascinating because when my hobby became my job, now what is Christmas break supposed to be like?
Yeah.
Right? You have this break and you're like, wait, if you tell me not to do my hobby, then you're not actually blessing me. You're not helping me.
That's right.
You're actually punishing me. You're saying don't do the thing that you love. And so it is a struggle, right? Like, I love what I do and I love the impact that I have. And I think I make a difference. And so
you definitely
I enjoy doing it, right? And so then then it goes to your question. How do you balance when you love your job, but you also need to have balance, right? Your family needs you. You need outside hobbies, etc. My answer is what I call work-life integration. And it doesn't work if you don't love your job. So I think, everyone that says, like, on your deathbed, you never said you wished you worked more. I always want to ask those people, but yeah, did they love their job? Or did they hate their job? Sure, if they hate their job, no one's going to want to work more. Right. But when you're making a difference and you're working with amazing people who inspire you, it is a balance. And so I like work-life integration. So, for example, next week, I'm going down to San Diego to check out places for Swaay.Health. We'll see if it's San Diego or Phoenix. Little
San Diego,
teaser.
San Diego.
That's what everyone says. If we can make San Diego work, it would probably be San Diego. But when I go down, I'm going to meet with a few people. I'm going to, my wife's coming with me. We're going to meet with people. We're going to tour some hotels. We're going to go to the San Diego Zoo. We're going to probably go to a Padres game. We're going to go do some disc golf. We're going to visit a friend that we haven't seen. We're going to grab dinner. We're going to go to the temple, which is a religious place for us that we can go visit. I'm going to see my aunt at the temple. So, is next week a vacation or is next week work? And the answer is yes, right? Like, it's both of them. And, obviously I'm blessed to be able to do that. And the work that I do allows for that. But I think people underestimate, like, if you're doing work that you enjoy with people that you enjoy, work-life integration is beautiful. If I go to New York, I hang out with my work friends and it's an amazing time. Right. It's not, suffering or, whatever. So anyway, that's one hint that I have is, it's okay to integrate the two and enjoy both of them at the same time.
I couldn't agree with you more. The only thing that I would add, that reading between the lines and also adding from our past conversations with each other, is that it also comes down to prioritization, but not necessarily one is exclusive of the other, but that, okay, you say your wife's number one. I assume by our conversation that she is, and work might be a very close second, but you sort of can measure, and by now you have a feel for, is my wife getting enough time? Is my work getting enough time? And that integration might flow and be very fluid, but it works for you. And I think that's really key, right? Is finding what works for you. And let's not forget, you are blessed to be able to do what you do, but you've built it. You very intentionally have built it over time, and this thing has been growing now for how long? 10, 15 years?
I mean, the first blog post was 18, 19 years ago, but we quit the day job about 15 years ago. So it's been a long time. I would only add one thing, though. I don't want to act like I know the answers, because I get it wrong.
None of us do. None of us do. That's what this is about.
Yeah, and that's actually probably the key to it. It's not so much that I have it figured out, but that I'm okay if my wife comes and says, hey, you've gone too far.
Yeah.
Right? Or that I go to her and say, hey, my work needs a little bit more right now, right? And she has to be understanding of that on occasion as well, because there are certain times. If it's hymns, what hymns are like, right? Like, I'm all in, and sure, I'm going to text her and I'm going to wish that I was with her, but I'm all in, and and top to bottom, dedicated to the cause of doing 70 videos at hymns while hitting up 6 parties each night to try to build the business. So
that's right.
Like there's a time and a season. I know you're a music guy, so for everything there's a time and a season.
That's right.
It's also but
classic song from the 60s. I think was it the Byrds, To Everything Turn? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's part of the balance, is allowing for us to be wrong and to make mistakes, and then to apologize and to try to improve going forward. And, so understanding on both sides is probably the key, and having someone that you could talk to, whether it's a partner or whether it's some other trusted advisor, I think that's key.
It's just, it seems to be about, for you, and I would agree for me, about holding it loosely, like doing your best, but holding it loosely and being open to what others bring to you, as long as you know which others you can listen to and which you should say no to, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a question for you, Josh, because it's one that I've struggled with. So I'm going to turn the tables on you a little, which seems appropriate.
This might be a first for the podcast. Nobody ever asked me a question, but I love this. Come on.
But the question is, we're talking about balance, right?
Yeah.
And so, you when you look at balancing your life, how do you approach it when you're like, I want to passionately be all in on this, right? And I want to build something that's really valuable and useful. But then, hey, family's important. Like, you can't do everything. So how do you approach it?
I've had 2 ahas since starting this podcast that I'll share. And one, I was actually working out with my trainer, and he had me do this exercise where I was sitting on a balance ball, and I had to pick my hands and my feet up and balance. And what I noticed in that moment was balance was not stillness. I was constantly making adjustments to balance. I wasn't still. I was moving, and I was actually working my muscles very hard. I was very sore the next day after these series of exercises, because balance takes work. And so that was aha number 1. Aha number 2, I was talking to another podcast guest, and she was saying she has sort of a margin of error in her life where nothing's ever perfectly in balance, but she, within 10 15% on either side, she holds pretty loosely, and she's okay with that margin of error, and so you ramp it up for hymns, but then you balance it out by spending a little extra time with your wife and family after hymns, right? And so you have this sort of active work of balance versus having this misnomer of being perfectly still with the stacked rocks and you're doing your meditations. And I'm all good with meditations for our listeners. Meditations are healthy, but balance from a work and life standpoint to me is actually very hard work. And realizing that and committing to doing the work is the way to get better at it.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. But there's a core question here that I think is a challenge in our current society. And the core question is, how much is enough? Right? And I think that can apply to work. How much success in work is enough? Our economic society says never, right? And I think that's false and it's wrong.
It's very flawed.
But how much is enough for the family too, right? You want them to be independent. You want them to have their own. So that's what I struggle with on this balance. The ball is an interesting one. It takes work and it takes some effort and even some acknowledgement to say, man, what I have is enough. And in a business, that's scary because a business that's not growing is dying. And so this is, but not always,
That's a really interesting question though. I think, I mean, sure, I struggle with that, but those morning gratitudes and prayers that you were talking about, I think that helps us realize that either what we have is enough or who we are or what we are doing is enough, or maybe it points out a hole that you need to improve on. But I think if you shoulder the what is enough, for me anyway, I can slide into the am I enough question, which is a very dangerous one. Speaking of therapy, that will send you to therapy pretty quickly. And it comes down to being confident in your self-worth, which takes a lot of work, again, to kind of be confident in your self-worth, but also having some sort of marker that is deeply meaningful to you. I don't subscribe to a number in my bank account measures success. I subscribe to, can I help one person today? That's success. Yes, I have to pay my bills. I have to put my kids through school. I have to pay for all of the things. But that doesn't drive success. That's just a necessity of life. If we were hunter-gatherers, I got to gather and hunt enough food to feed my family, but that doesn't make a successful life, right? We've got to, I look at money as a tool and living the life that, how do I put this? Living a good life that I feel blessed and I can give to others, to me, is the definition of success. And so I need to do things every morning like prayer and gratitudes and meditations to remind myself of that when I get too out of whack.
Well, it's interesting. I was having this discussion with a friend recently, and we were looking back. If you look at the farming era, right, a couple hundred years ago, we're not talking a long time ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. To be a good father, you were out in the field working your butt off to make sure that your family ate. Right? Like that was the definition of good father. It wasn't being in the home, spending time, playing games. It was like, are you working your butt off? Because it consumed your entire life, making sure that the farm was effective and that you had food on the table and that you could eat and you had what you needed. And that's why they had a lot of kids anyway. There's a whole other side of that, right? To be able to take care of the farm. Well, society evolved and automated so many things that now we have more free time.
That's right.
And so, like now if you work all the time now, the way a farmer did, the hours that the farmer put in, you're a deadbeat dad, right?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how that society has shifted the perspective. And I look at it and I say, that's a good thing, right? It's good that we don't have to work 12-hour days and we're dead and we're just grateful to come in and that there's a meal on the table because we can't barely move because we've been busting our butt all day, right? Like this is a good change. But can we take it too far where we're like, yeah, but there is a balance to all of this, and so anyway, that's an interesting societal shift that we've had that's allowed for free time. Now, to be fair, there are things that we know are bad. If you're a dad that works all day and then sits with for me a root beer, for other people a beer, watching sports for the next 5 hours and not being with your kids, that's probably not good either.
Right.
So anyway, it's all a balance. But it's interesting how society has shifted that perspective of what is good and what isn't.
Yeah, and how it can sneak into our own psyche and really mess with us. I've struggled with that at times for sure. It's like, how much is enough? How hard do I press? When do I quit? And I'm not sure there are perfect answers to that. Hence, back to the balance ball. It's constant motion and it's constant effort to balance and counterbalance and regain balance over and over again. And I think your life is measured by the value you add to the people around you. That's really what I think it comes down to.
Yeah, but it's funny because even that idea, when is that enough? When have I helped enough people? Right?
I think we could take another hour on that very easily because I don't know. But I think it comes down to heart and effort for me. Did I do my best today to help people? And can I sleep well tonight because I did? And that's enough. Could I have helped more? Yes, but at what cost, right? There's this unknown point of diminishing returns, and trying to find and stay right ahead of that seems to be the right thing for me anyway.
Yeah, for me, I would take a slightly different one, and I don't always execute this properly, but I always end the day with, I am enough, and what I did was enough. But that doesn't mean I can't look back and say, how can I make tomorrow better? So, like having that mindset of I am enough, but let's just see if we can do better tomorrow. And, I think that's how I approach it. And sometimes I didn't mean to make this a spiritual one, but that's what that's as well.
Yeah, I very much have my own spiritual beliefs that tie into all of this. And it's funny you say you end every day with I am enough. I start every day with that. It's part of my morning papers where I literally write my gratitudes and I write my self-affirmations, and I am enough is almost always one of them because I need to know that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the beautiful part. At the end of the day, I love praying and talking with God and kind of, because at the end of the day, for me, that's what's important is, have I done what I could today? And what else can I do better tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that's where you got to leave it. So, well, what's next for you other than going to San Diego, figuring out where Swaay is going to be in San Diego? What else have you got on your horizon that you're really excited about to keep you personally and professionally growing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the new marriage is a ride and a journey on its own, right? And so, navigating that, and helping my kids through that journey because, they're as impacted as I am. I think that's probably the biggest growth that's going to happen over the next little while. We're actually doing long distance. That could be a whole other podcast to how we do that because her daughter's in Salt Lake and my kids are in Vegas. So it's a journey. Talk about balancing, right?
Wow, yeah.
that's the challenge. And and then we also have opportunities. And at Healthcare IT Today, we're getting invited to more and more user conferences, to other conferences to do our videos. And so that's been a big growth of the business, which is awesome, but that also means more travel. And so what does that look like? So I think, my biggest next journey, which if Colin's listening, he'll probably love this part, which is I have to figure out, how do I go from the guy who wants to optimize everything to growing the business in a way that isn't just me? We've done that a lot. We're up to 20 people, but how do we grow the business in a way that it's much less John dependent, which I think right now we're in a pretty interesting place. But how do we take that next level of growth that that I have to let go of? So anyway, that's where I am in my growth journey, is how can I let go of things and trust in other people and bring on the right people to be able to grow the business. So that's where I don't have the answers to that, because I'm a control freak that wants to optimize everything. And so that's my next step in the growth trajectory, I think.
I am here for it. I'm cheering you on. It's hard. It's really, really hard. But you have to trust others, or there is a finite amount of work that you can do. Even if you answer how much is enough, there's a finite amount of time that you have, even a time on this earth, right? And so you've got to figure out if you're going to build it bigger than yourself because you think that's where it should go. That's a hard journey, but man, I'm cheering you on. I appreciate you sharing your story with us here, and thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Josh, man. It's always a pleasure, and glad we're able to have the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. What a great conversation with John. Thanks as always to our sponsors at Market Scale for making this podcast happen. And until next time, I hope you go out and pursue growth well. See you soon.